Okay, cool. All right. So I'm Vanessa Eve, and I am here today with Daisy Ducati. Daisy, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you.
I'm so glad you can be here. And so, Daisy, you are our very first brand partner for Elevated with StreamMate. And we're just here today to discuss your platform and really the work that you're doing and what's important to you as far as your involvement with with our community right now and your career. But before we get into that, would you mind just telling us just how you got started in the industry and what compelled you to work in adult?
Yeah, well, so I started probably about almost 10 years now. And I was doing like fashion modeling and some glamour modeling, and I got a casting for a fetish runway show. And it was like wearing latex, and it was like a nightclub. It was a really fun show. And I ended up buying the outfit that I wore on the runway and wearing it home because I loved it so much. And that kind of started me on my journey into fetish modeling, which evolved into like the wrestling fetish shoots. And then eventually I just ended up shooting for kink, which was amazing. And I loved every minute of it. And I really enjoyed, like, I don't know, doing the weird stuff, I guess. I really enjoyed like being able to test the limits of my body and being able to try new things. And it's been a really exciting journey.
How did those different opportunities, those different pathways open up, like the wrestling fetish and moving over into more kink? Like, did that happen naturally, or was it more so as gigs and opportunities opened up?
I mean, I was just looking for modeling gigs at first, and the opportunities opened up, and obviously like fetish and adult work pays a little bit more than some of the other stuff I was doing, and it's a lot more fun for me. So I decided to take more and more of those kinds of gigs.
Okay, and so it seems like your focus was a bit more in the kink world for quite some time. So can you tell us a little bit more about your time just in that particular focus?
Yeah, so back when I first started, like I was really just starting to explore kink in general, and I ended up studying under a mentor who's a pro dom named Eve Minax, and she kind of taught me the ropes of like pro domination and fetish play and like how to work in a dungeon type stuff. And at the same time, I started shooting for kink, and I really just enjoyed the play of it. It's been really fun.
Was that daunting for you going into like learning about the different fetishes, and also was that something that you had some sort of like mentorship or guidance with, or was it more so like you were learning it in real time?
I definitely worked under my mentor for a while, and she's like a mother to me in a lot of ways. Eve definitely like not only taught me the skills of like how to use a flogger, how to use a whip, things like that, but she also taught me like how to deal with talking to people and how to run the business end of things. And so I really had a lot of help there.
Okay, so how did then that segue into more of the mainstream adult side?
So I was shooting at kink a lot, like sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. And then once that started to slow down, I wanted to see what other opportunities were out there. And like I met a lot of girls that were shooting in LA and working for agencies. And so I started seeking out some more of the like mainstream LA gigs. And I shot for most of the major companies at this point, but a lot of it was through like other models referrals. I did work with a couple of agencies over the years, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend the path that I chose. I definitely tend to work better as an independent performer.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of more of the default these days, I think, for people entering our industry. Like in the past, the assumption was, oh, you had to go through an agency, but that does not seem to be the case so much so anymore. I guess also just depending on maybe the direction that you're headed or that you're trying to head with your career. But so tell us a little bit more about like the experiences with the agency that you had.
Yeah, I had pretty bad agency experiences. My first agent, I'm not going to like mention any names or go into any
Sure.
like details, but my first agent was actually like harming my career and costing me work. And I was working about half as much as I was before. And then my agent went and like was telling people not to work with me, which was strange. So I got out of that contract as quickly as possible, and immediately was booking more work, because one thing that people don't consider is that when you book through an agency, the company has to pay an agency fee on top of paying your fee. And a lot of the companies that I was already working for didn't want to pay more to book me if they'd already shot me a bunch. So it was easier to work on my own. And like, especially now, there's so many opportunities to just shoot your own content and put it out there, and then people can see how you work and what you look like on camera, and they can book you based on that. Whereas before, like, you had to shoot for the major companies to be known. So things have changed a lot even since I started in the industry, and now it's much easier to just do your own thing.
Did you get a lot of help as far as like development as a performer when you were starting out, whether, I mean, through mentors, but certainly through these agents that you were paying? Did they help you to develop your career path?
Not really. Like, I mean, I was a unique case because I had already been in the industry for about a year before I started even considering having an agent. So I kind of already knew the ins and outs, or like just basic like how to work type stuff. I did miss a lot of the development that other models get. Like, one thing that I found out later on in my career is that a lot of other models will like save certain sex acts for later in their career and then charge more for the first time. I missed out on that opportunity because I kind of came out the gate running and was like doing gangbangs in my first 6 months. But other than that, like, I pretty much figured it all out on my own. And like, I did learn a lot of things the hard way, but that's one of the reasons why I like talking to new models and sharing whatever information I have that can help them, because I feel like so much more can be learned from networking and building community than just like relying on an agent to be your daddy, which is what a lot of these agents want to be to these models.
How detrimental, like, what do you feel that that was detrimental, like those experiences with, you know, maybe not getting booked like how you should have, shall I say? It sounds like it's being held back from different opportunities.
Yeah, I feel like I wasted time and opportunities by trying to have an agent. And it definitely cost me work, in a very real way. And if I were to do it all over again, I would just skip that part entirely.
So where do you see the place? Because obviously people still utilize agents, and of course not all of them are bad eggs, but
Yeah.
yeah, but where do you see that fitting in terms of, in your opinion, in someone's career right now? Like, would they need to be on a certain trajectory at that point in order to then make to get an agent, or maybe wanting to focus more so on mainstream porn?
Yeah, I think an agent is a good idea for someone who's in their first year and doesn't know where to start and has like specific goals for shooting for big companies. I think in that situation, an agent could be a good idea. And even then, you'd still have to like do some research and find out who is actually a good agent, because there's a lot that just don't do well at all. But I think for newer performers, it's it can be a good idea, especially if they do need a lot of development and aren't able to just figure things out on the fly. But I also think that you could get the same value out of networking and building community and talking to other models. So it depends on how a person wants to run their career. And for me personally, I tend to take a more independent approach to everything. So
did any of them ever actually have like direct sex work experience, just in your, that you knew of anyways?
Yeah, I did work for one agent, who, like, one of the partners in the agency, it was a model. But again, like, it wasn't as bad of an experience as my first agent, but at the same time, like, it didn't really help me get more work. Actually, an approach that I would usually recommend to newer models is, I have a publicist. I work with XXX Star PR, and they've been amazing for me over the years. And also, like, if I have any questions, if I don't know who a performer is and want to know what the deal is, or if I don't know how something works, I can just call up my publicist and ask and not have to give him a cut of all my shoots.
That is so smart, because essentially they can consult you, but they also presumably know a lot of people within the industry. They kind of know people's reputations, or maybe projects that they're working on that might be able to fit, that might fit with whatever you have going on.
Yeah. And if I
Yeah.
want to work for a specific company, like, you can put in good word for me there. Like, it's a lot of the same value as an agent, but without the cost.
Yeah. So what would you say would be like desirable qualities if you were to retain an agent at this point?
I mean, honestly, I probably wouldn't. Just because I have a system now and it works. But I also, like, nowadays I do a lot more of my own independent work, and I'm not shooting for other companies as much. So I probably wouldn't have an agent, but if I did, I would want to be able to say, hey, these are the specific companies that I haven't worked for that I would like to, please get me shoots with them.
Well, so you mentioned before that, that's educating others and sharing the knowledge about, especially after your experiences, I guess maybe some missteps earlier on in your career. You like to share that with other performers who are coming into the industry or who are newer. So what does that usually look like when, how do people have access to you? Is it just usually just through social media, or how does that work?
Yeah, usually people contact me directly through social media. I have spoken in a couple of, like, workshops and webinar type situations, but usually people contact me directly and have specific questions or just want to know how to get into the industry. And if someone hasn't shot any adult content at all, I'm usually pretty hesitant, because I don't want to be the person that, like, introduces them to the industry, because sex work isn't necessarily for everybody and internet porn is forever, and it's a huge decision to make, and I want them to be able to make that decision on their own. But if someone's already trying to work in the industry and putting their content out there, I'm more than happy to share my knowledge and resources and what I've learned along the way.
There's not really a structure. It's really just you've made yourself open and available for people to contact you.
It's also like, there are people that, like, have consulting sessions and they charge a fee, and that's not necessarily something that I'm comfortable with this kind of information, because a lot of it is, like, safety information and things people need to know to protect themselves. So I'd rather just help everyone to know how to not get screwed than to try to hold that behind a paywall.
Yeah, I guess whenever like an indie creator comes to you asking for advice, then what are usually the questions that they're asking you?
Usually a lot of people want to know how to work for companies that I've worked for, and that's usually easy. Like, I can tell them who to contact about booking. And most companies, like, they're always looking for new models, so sharing a booking contact isn't usually a big deal. But I also get a lot of people that like don't know how to get started creating their own content, and a lot of times it's just a matter of explaining how easy it can be. Like, a lot of content can be shot on your cell phone with reasonable lighting. Like, it doesn't have to be super complicated. You can just upload it, and I tell people how to like advertise their own content, that sort of thing. And
Okay.
also, if people have questions about specific people I've worked with and reputations, a lot of people are asking for references. And there are people that I've worked for that I wouldn't recommend, and I'm generally really honest about that. Yeah, a lot of fetish performers contact me, and a lot of young women that want to learn how to be DOMs contact me, and I don't necessarily get into like one-on-one teaching of specific skills, like how to flog and whip and things like that, unless I'm in person on set with someone. But I will happily share resources and information.
Okay, so it's the greater community effort of just like supporting one another and networking, disseminating information, which is awesome actually, because I've noticed, especially like in the cam world, let's just say if one performer decides to start a studio and then they'll start recruiting other performers, I think that could be like a somewhat complicated dynamic. And I don't know if you've ever ventured into that side of things, but it can be somewhat of a complicated dynamic, because I think the people that I've worked with in the past, they've kind of wrestled with the idea of taking a cut of another performer's earnings. So is that something that you've ever faced?
Yeah,
working with people?
I do think that's very complicated. Like, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable taking a cut of another performer's earnings. And I have also worked for cam studios that changed their payout process and like decided they were going to take a bigger cut, and it really kind of screwed me. So I would never personally feel comfortable doing that, and I feel like a lot of times the site that the content is hosted on is already taking enough of a cut that it almost makes it not worth it to take a bigger cut out of that. So I don't know, like I don't feel comfortable taking other performers' money. Like, we're in this together. I see other performers as coworkers, not as like employees, you know?
Yeah. And it's just a whole different, I mean, I'd imagine like it's just a whole different dynamic once you become kind of like the overseer or the manager or the boss. Yeah. Which is why actually, like when I've sensed that hesitation, then I've more so referred people to just doing like a referral or something like that, so that they still get a payout for it, but they're not retaining earnings for like the longer term. Yeah, if that's something that's doesn't really sit well with them.
I think that like referral programs and like affiliate programs, like I will definitely encourage people to use my affiliate links for things. But that, like, it's not necessarily taking a cut from the performer.
I mean, just in our industry overall, since we're talking about kind of like percentages, and each platform is very different in terms of like their business structure and what have you. But I guess from a performer perspective, like, can you share a little bit of just in your mind, kind of the outlook from the performer end about payouts, because it always seemed to kind of be a point of contention, right? Just a bit with, well, the companies are retaining X amount, but, I'm providing the media, I'm providing the entertainment. So can you just share from like a performer perspective, kind of, and not just from your own perspective, what your feelings are about that?
So the biggest problem that I've run into with all sorts of adult content sites is when the payout structure changes out of the blue. Like when you sign up for something, you agree to a certain payout structure, and then a lot of times what happens with adult sites is maybe 6 months or a year in, they'll change their whole business model and the payout structure will change. Like I worked for a cam studio where the original agreement was that we could use the studio for free if we cammed for 3 or more hours because they had their own website. And then they decided to contract with an existing cam site, and suddenly they wanted us to pay for the studios and they wanted to take a bigger cut of the tips we made. And so it made it so that we would only be making like 30% or something. And that to me is unreasonable. Like if you're not up there showing whole with me, you're not getting 70% of my earnings.
Right. So what happened? So did you end up leaving that situation pretty quickly after that?
Yeah, I was not going to agree to that. Like that just seemed unreasonable to me, and it seemed unsustainable also. Like we don't make that much that 30% would seem attractive.
Is that kind of a common thing that you see or that you've seen across our industry?
Yeah, it's happened to me personally on a few different sites and platforms. There's that, and then also like platforms just disappearing or changing their terms of service on top of that. There's a lot of like uncertainty in this industry that makes it a lot more stressful.
There absolutely is. Like as someone who kind of toes that line between, you know, working for performers and working with a company, like I can see on one end, like this is why you had to do what you needed to do, but on the other side, I also see the impacts that can have. And so just kind of making the two sides understand each other, you know, it won't necessarily reconcile for everybody, right? But that's why I guess this is great, because you can also make decisions for yourself and what's best for you and your business. Yeah, I mean, do you feel like people struggle with that? Just when performers contact you, does that ever come up at all in your conversations?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is we really need companies to be upfront and clear about what we're agreeing to, because when we sign up for a site, we agree to a certain thing, and then if that changes all of a sudden, that changes how we pay our bills. So like, for instance, with the OnlyFans thing that happened where they were considering banning adult content entirely, like that really was a terrifying prospect because a lot of us make a large portion of our income that way. And then if that's suddenly just taken out from under us, then we have to completely rearrange our whole business model and start from scratch, basically.
So what do you think would be needed to kind of, you know, because, you know, obviously people, we don't have any control over what businesses do end up doing and the decisions that they make, but how could we maybe make this process easier or more ethical all the way around? Is it just more transparency? What do you think is needed here?
I definitely think more transparency and like clear communication about what's going on would really help. Like the biggest thing about the OnlyFans situation that was scary was that it was so sudden. Like they were talking about making the changes almost immediately, which gave people no time to plan for it. So I think that giving more time and more communication and like explaining why would really help a lot of people, and just like trying not to change our payout structure would really help, because we agree to one thing and it'd be cool if we could stick with that, you know, whatever the payout agreement is.
So whenever these things happen, like what are the channels, like what are the resources that performers have to go to maybe get more info or get advocacy?
I mean, there's a lot of community building happening on social media, specifically Twitter. I go to Twitter for a lot of information. If I have a question, I just tweet it and people will chime into the conversation. There are forums and Discord groups and Reddit subreddits. There are a lot of places performers can go to like exchange information, and that's one of the cool things about the way the industry is changing, is that because performers are becoming more independent, it's more likely that we'll all exchange information and talk about what's going on and try to work it out together.
Yeah, and I did notice that this has been something that never has really changed. There's always been a, support for one another across our industry, but particularly for within the performer community. Yeah. Okay, so let's shift over and talk a little bit more about your work with, so you're a co-founder of BIPOC Adult Industry Collective. So can you tell us a little bit more about that organization and how that got started and your role in that?
Yeah, so before the pandemic, a lot of us were dealing with a lot of overt racism in the industry and just a lot of things that would not fly in any other industry. Like just from my own experience, I have been told by directors on set that I would not be paid as much as the white performer that I was working with because she was higher value, things like that. A whole bunch of us got together and decided to form this collective to not only have collective bargaining with some of the bigger companies, because it's really hard to ask for changes when you're just one person and you're an independent contractor and they can just decide not to book you again. But if a bunch of us get together and say, hey, this is not acceptable and also like not legal business practice, so this needs to change or none of us will work with you, then we have a lot more power that way. So there was that. And we also wanted to pull together community resources as far as there's a lot of workshops and classes that are taught through BIPOC Collective. And there's also the micro grant program, because when the pandemic first hit and the lockdown happened, a lot of performers, especially those who were depending on studio shoots or who may be depending more heavily on in-person work, a lot of people were really, really struggling to make ends meet because things were just taken away all of a sudden and work was just gone. So there's a micro grant program that performers can apply to, and it's anyone can apply as long as you are an online performer and you've been in the industry for at least a year. And there's a whole group of people in the collective that choose every month who's going to get the grant. And it changes from month to month, but I think it's usually $500 is the grant. And it's been able to help a lot of people like survive through the pandemic. And then with the workshops, there's a lot of educational resources for like how to change up your business strategy or how to protect yourself. Like I've taught cybersecurity workshops, which is a really, really important topic for online sex workers because there's a lot of risk of doxing and just real scary, sketchy stuff. So there's a lot of precautions we have to take there, and it's something that the average person may not know about. So the BIPOC Collective has been a really amazing resource, and I definitely recommend performers get involved there.
Yeah, is it open to, who is it open to? And is it more of a membership thing, or is it just whoever wants to support? What is that structure like right now?
Yeah, I mean, anyone can attend the workshops or donate to the collective and become a part of it. The resources are more specifically for performers of color because we're so marginalized in this industry, and there's just so much that needs to be done to raise performers of color up to a level of equality. But anyone can participate and come to the events.
So this that was formed around the time of the beginning of this pandemic, right? And right around 2020. So and that was like a huge in America, that was a huge time, and it still is. So whenever you're approaching these conversations, whenever we're trying to get to maybe a more ethical place as an industry, and you need to breach these topics that might be uncomfortable for some, do you sense discomfort for one, or are they generally like receptive to kind of learning and trying to progress?
Some people and companies are receptive to learning and making changes. There were definitely a lot of uncomfortable conversations in the beginning. Like we were having collective meetings with different companies that we thought weren't doing well with diversity and ethics. And we came to them with specific asks, like paying models equal pay or things, just general equality stuff. And there were definitely some conversations where we felt like we weren't getting anywhere and it was kind of a stalemate. And there were a couple of talks of boycotts, but I feel like generally most companies and most producers and directors were willing to hear us out at the very least.
Yeah. So whenever you do go into those conversations, and obviously, you address kind of, what the issue is there usually a goal that is established and kind of a plan as to like, this is how, we can support you? How does that typically work?
Yeah. So with the talks that I've been involved in, pretty much we would in advance come up with a specific list of things that we wanted to request from the company. And then we would organize a meeting and talk to the executives or the producers or whoever was in charge and say, like, these are our demands, what can we do? And we would hold a negotiation and hear their side of why or why not. And most of the time we could reach some sort of agreement. Like I said, there were a couple of times where we were at a stalemate and there were talks of boycotts. I don't think it ever fully came to that, but it gets a little tense sometimes. Like, a lot of people aren't ready to change their views and their ways. And
I'd imagine even getting into the room or getting those meetings it can be a little bit difficult as well, right? Because of the discomfort involved. And also I can see that there can be a little bit of trepidation, maybe if some, especially if you feel like you might be on the defense from the get-go because your practices aren't found to be maybe the best. Yeah. How do you guys get into those meetings? I don't want to, I guess, sorry, I don't want to like, delve and like, you don't have to disclose, like the exact how, but.
No, it's okay. The biggest thing is like the collective bargaining aspect. It's so much easier to even have those conversations when there's a large group of us that are all having the same asks. So if it's just one performer who's on a set and who's made uncomfortable by something that's happening, it's a lot harder to say, hey, this is not acceptable, because you may just not get hired. And a lot of us can't afford to lose work. So having a large group of us coming together and saying this needs to change, it's a lot more powerful, because again, there's risk of boycotts, and these companies don't want their reputation damaged, and a lot of them don't want the general public to know about the things that need to be changed. A lot of it is like industry secrets. So I think that coming together as a large group has definitely helped to make these conversations happen.
Do you feel like where we are as an industry, like even just as a whole, like these practices or certain mindsets, these have just kind of been there since forever and nothing has really evolved? Or what do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, racism has always been racism. It's always been there. And unfortunately, I don't really see an end to racism anytime soon. But I think that there has been slow progress, at least in the years that I've been working. There has been slow progress. And I think that a lot of companies are open to talking about change at the very least. So like there's hope, but it's been very, very slow.
Well, but we still see, especially performers of color, and I'm sure, everyone is going to make their own decisions at the end of the day as far as who they want to work with, what's the context. And so is it holding back, I guess, potential progress, so long as people are willing to still continue to work under those terms or under certain conditions, I guess?
I mean, a big issue that we run into is the fact that specifically racist porn is also still in demand. People still want to see that and want to pay for it. And because there are fewer opportunities for performers of color, a lot of performers are forced to work in those situations because that's where the money is. So at the same time, we're having these conversations and talking to these companies. We also need our fans to vote with their dollars. Like, if racist porn is in demand, they're going to keep making it. And like, again, back to my personal experience, I've had scenes where I've shot a perfectly normal scene with a white performer, and then the DVD came out and the title was super racist and something that I had not agreed to. So like stuff like that is going to keep happening as long as racist porn is in demand.
Do you find that, racist porn, it exists more so on the film side of our industry? Because in general, I mean, there also seems to be a lot less control in that regard from the performer end versus, as an independent creator, that maybe you're creating your own content, you have a lot more control over certain things. So whenever you say that it exists, do you mean it's more so on one segment of adult, or do you see it across the board still?
I mean, again, there's racism everywhere. There are individual performers who also create racist content, but I think it's less of an issue because it's easier to just not work with those people. Whereas when the larger companies that are more visible online and in the world and also pay the higher wages, I think that it's more of an issue when larger companies shoot racist stuff. But yeah, independent performers who are working for themselves and shooting their own content obviously have a lot more control over what's going on. And even if you're just shooting with another performer for their content, like it's a lot easier to discuss the boundaries and what you are and are not willing to do. Whereas with the bigger companies, there's a different power dynamic, I guess. And you want to keep working for those companies, but at the same time, like, it's hard to demand the kind of respect and equality that is needed.
Yeah. I could see it being trivial, even if, because there are huge companies and, some of them might have offshoot partners or studios. So is it trivial for performers of color to even engage with maybe not even the direct company, but even the affiliates then that they're partnered with?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big web of like power and dynamic in this industry, and it gets really complicated because like one company is not just a standalone company. They're affiliated with a bunch of different things, or they have different branches of the same company. And it can be very complicated, but.
Yeah. You mentioned then that fans, they can vote with their dollars, and certainly performers too. They can choose, who they will and will not work with. But I mean, is that enough, do you think? I mean, as far as like really making an impact on our industry, how can we make a bigger impact as far as like positive change within our industry?
I mean, I think that the biggest impact is what fans are willing to buy, because that is ultimately like, that's how capitalism works. What people will spend their money on will get made. And if people are not willing to pay for racist porn or unethical porn, then the companies will be forced to change. However, it would be a lot quicker if we could get industry executives and directors and producers to actually care about the performers they're working with and care about our needs and our feelings and what we are dealing with, and to want to produce ethical porn. But at the same time, like, money talks and what sells is going to get made.
Wow. So I mean, I guess I just never considered it. I've never considered it more so from the fans' perspective, like that they just play such a heavy, they have such a heavy influence in our industry, because there's like so many different types of people out there, including racist people. Like, wow, I don't know. I guess I'm just also slightly naive. Like, I didn't know that the demand for racist porn would supersede to a level that it's like studios or companies are willing to forego more ethical practices for the sake of giving the fans what they want.
It's a really unfortunate truth.
Wow. Okay, well, so where do we go from here then? Specifically for like performers, maybe if they're wanting to work with ethical companies, especially, what are some things that they can kind of do to verify, if you will?
I mean, it all goes back to building community and networking. Like, ask other performers. There were so many times in the beginning of my career when I would just accept any shoot and not talk to people about who I was going to work for, and that I would find out afterwards that they were like a known crazy person. And so I think it's really important for performers to talk to each other and ask questions and like find out about different companies' reputations and what other performers' experiences are with working with them. I think that so much can be learned there. And like, I personally have gotten so far from just talking to other performers about something I was considering.
So what is your outlook then for the future, and also and where you are currently?
I have definitely been doing a lot more educational work. I do enjoy that very much. And I also just, I love performing. Like, I am an attention whore. I love performing. So I don't know if I will ever be able to totally give up performing. I am excited now to be able to move back into more live performances. Like, I'm starting a new feature series in Vegas that I'm really excited about, and I'm excited to do more like stage performance. But yeah, I really just love being in front of the camera.
Yeah. And what about for our industry overall? Because there is just a whole new generation also, filtering in, and especially during the age of COVID. So what is your outlook for the future of adult?
I would really, really like to see the adult industry. I would like to see performers. I guess performers are becoming more independent and more community oriented. I would like to see that grow. I love seeing performers kind of work at their own pace and figure out what they do and don't want to do on their own, and not have someone telling them what they should and should not do. So I really enjoy seeing performers come together, have these conversations, and have open communication industry wide. So I'd really like to help foster that more.
Kudos to you, Daisy, for the work that you're doing, but also tackling what I imagine, I know, are not easy conversations to have, and they're not the most comfortable. You know, and regardless of the outcome, you know, that's amazing that you're bringing this forth to light, because it is important, not just for adults, not just for sex workers, but you know, as a society, I think. So no, I appreciate you. And if people want to get more information about BIPOC Adult Industry Collective, where should they go?
Yes, definitely check out the website or hit up Cinnamon Love or Jet Setting Jasmine. They're amazing, amazing people, amazing resources. Also, Amberly Rothfield is a really incredible resource in the industry. They're an amazing person and a wealth of knowledge. And I have personally learned so much from Amberly's webinars and YouTube videos and books. And they teach a lot of like technical details about like how algorithms work and how to like get your content seen. And I think Amberly covers some of the cybersecurity stuff as well. But there are a lot of really amazing people in this industry that are worth checking out their work as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Daisy, for taking the time to speak with us. And yeah, we'll be on the lookout for what's to come with you and your career.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Peripheral catches your blood.